Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present. Exciting times, challenging times, to say the least, with this pandemic and everything else that's going on. But we're excited. I do want to announce today that we were fortunate as well. We applied for it, but this is really a community win. We all should be celebrating the fact that we were able to secure a grant from EDA for strategic planning purposes. We just found out about that late last week. And I want to thank, I know Brianna is on the call from Congressman Harder's office. Congressman Harder was very instrumental behind the scenes to help us get this grant. The grant's $155,000, and it's going to enable us to go through a very sophisticated strategic planning process, which I will talk about in just a few minutes. But it was a team lift, and really what they did is they recognized that we are working well together. We're collaborating well as a county, as the chamber, workforce development, Stanislaus Community Foundation, and they realize that we have the means to pull this off. So we're excited about that. And it's all about how we're going to respond in an economic development. How are we going to respond to COVID? And how are we going to take what we've learned from COVID and put that into a strategic plan? So coming out of COVID, the world has changed significantly. The way people do business has changed and will continue to be a different paradigm as we go forward. And so that being said, what have we learned from COVID? We've learned a lot. One thing I've learned, and I'm just so proud of our county, how we came together, all the different groups, the chamber, Doris, Workforce Development, the Community Foundation, OS, the cities, the county, everybody, how we came together and put together a very sharp and very extensive COVID relief plan for our local businesses. Now, we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a lot of issues and a lot of challenges, but I'm so proud of our team, everybody coming together. And you think about all the CARES Act grants that were done, the county grant, the Doris led, and the city grants, and the state grant that's been done, and all the different programs, the Good to Go program, and what we did in terms of reacting very quickly and having a website where people could go to find out where they could get their PPP loans and their EIDL loans. Our banks were just phenomenal in working around the clock to make sure people got their PPP loans. I'm just so proud of how we came together. And so we should celebrate that. That was a really wonderful experience, and it continues on. But we've also seen some other major changes. We've seen changes in the workforce. We've seen businesses they were forced to have their employees work from home. We certainly, that's our case as well. Many of our employees are still working from home. And many of the tech companies over in Silicon Valley, they had their workers work from home, and anybody who could did that. Now, there were a lot of essential industries obviously couldn't do that, the hospitals and the manufacturers and others, but even those companies, their office staff, they had work from home. And they learned some lessons from that. They learned that it's okay to work from home, that their employees were productive. And so this is a paradigm that's not just going to go away after the pandemic. We should realize that a lot of employers are going to provide that flexibility to their employees going forward. I have a son. I like this one anecdote that I like to share. And this happened before the pandemic, but I have a son, my second oldest, works in tech. He works for a company called Qualtrics, which is headquartered in Provo, Utah. You may have heard about them. They just did an IPO, and they were bought out by SAP, and then they did an IPO. And he asked his boss if he could have permission to move to Boise, Idaho. They were living in Utah, but they wanted to move to Boise, to Meridian. That's where my daughter-in-law's parents live. And their employer said, sure, that'd be fine. And they set him up with an office, home office, and they actually paid for him to fly back to the headquarters once a month. And so then the pandemic hit. And not only was that the case for him, but this company had just built a Taj Mahal office building in Provo, millions of dollars. And now you go there and it's totally empty. And they're like, why did we build this Taj Mahal? And so a lot of corporate real estate decisions going forward are going to be impacted by the pandemic. You're going to see more flexibility. You're going to see less big offices and probably more regionally dispersed offices, co-working spaces, and that sort of thing. And you're going to see a difference in practically every industry. There's also going to be more focus on flexible work hours. A lot of employees, especially the up and coming employees, the Generation Z is that, I guess that's the name of the new generation. They're looking for flexibility, and a lot of employers are going to comply with that, not just because of the pandemic, but also something called the silver tsunami. Have you heard of that term before, the silver tsunami? What that means is when the baby boomers retire, and they're all retiring, well, there was this big swath of population that was created in this country after World War II. And it went from 1945 to 1963. I was in the last year of the baby boom. Those people are now retiring and they're not being replaced. The population is not keeping up with that pace. And so you have the pandemic, and then you have the silver tsunami on top of that, where people are, we're going to have severe labor shortages in this country. We already saw some of that before the pandemic, when the economy really started to move. But then even during the pandemic, we have lots of employers in our community who can't find people. And so flexibility is going to be a key word. And then there's a lot of concern. People are just not, they don't feel safe enough to go out and do a job. And so we have a lot of people staying at home, and they're just doing their essentials, and eventually they're going to come back in the workforce when they feel safe. So the vaccines are critically important. So economic changes. So there are a lot of workforce changes, but also economic changes. Some of our industries were severely impacted, and it's going to take a long time for them to come back. If you think about travel, entertainment, hospitality, they were severely impacted. We've seen a lot of business failure as a result. A lot of businesses, restaurants that went out of business, despite getting PPP. You know, that can't go on forever. And the longer they stay shut or if they're minimized by the stay-at-home orders, the more challenging it becomes from them. Impact on other industries. So in some industries, there is a greater demand. The winery industry, for example, during the pandemic, they've seen their demand go up. I guess people drink a lot more wine when they're stay at home. And so they've been trying to expand, but they can't find the workforce necessarily to facilitate that expansion. So that's an interesting trend. Pivot of services. A lot of industries had to pivot and find new ways to make money. And think about healthcare. You know, the healthcare industry, right after the pandemic hit, a lot of their essential or a lot of their secondary type services, what we consider non-essential, that kind of went away and has stayed away for a good part. Now they had to pivot and support all the COVID cases, but they lost a lot of money when they couldn't do some of these secondary services. And so that's slowly coming back, but it's been a challenge. And then there have been supply chain issues, you know, where if somebody's shut down and they can't provide their supply, then they have to go find other suppliers. And that's been a real challenge, especially with PPE. And another great thing that Doris did was to provide PPE for essential industries. They were able to use CARES Act funding for that. But going forward, the supply chain will still be an issue. Where can we get our essential services? You know, Cal OSHA passed, they added this new regulation that's just been just terrible, where if you have 3 cases of COVID in your plant, you could be shut down by Cal OSHA. And our industries have had to respond to that. And it's been really challenging for them. You shut down an industry, well, you cut off their sales, you cut off their production. It's very disruptive. So some of that is improving as we come out of the pandemic, but it will certainly have great implications on the future. Here in the Central Valley, we are actually doing better than many places, and that's because we're not so reliant on hospitality, tourism. I know Todd is, and Todd is going to change that. He's on the call today, and what he's doing is phenomenal. But we're not like Orange County, or we're not like San Francisco that relies so much, or Hawaii. Hawaii's just been devastated by this, by so much reliance on tourism. We have a lot of essential industries in the Central Valley. We have a lot of manufacturers, we have healthcare, and as a result of that, yeah, we've been impacted, and it's not good anywhere really, but it's not nearly as bad as some other places. If you look at our unemployment rate now compared to last year was about 6%. now it's about 9%. So it's still pretty severe, but we're kind of right at the state average for unemployment. Here's an interesting graph. So you think about, whenever you do a SWOT analysis, you think about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So there are some definite threats in California, and also because of the pandemic. But there's also a lot of opportunity. One thing that's happening is there's a reshoring initiative happening, or a phenomenon of manufacturing coming back to the United States. That was happening before the pandemic, but it's happening now and will happen in the future. A lot of our essential, what we consider even critical supplies, there's going to be more push for them to be manufactured in the United States. And as a result of that, the Valley has a really good story to tell. The other thing that will happen is, there used to be the distribution centers and logistics were, these huge big box, 1 million square feet, 2 million square feet centers. Well, because of the pandemic and because of the need to get material fast to a location, there's going to be a regionalization of distribution. So we're going to see smaller DCs, but more regionally focused. And that will benefit, obviously, large population centers like Northern California, Southern California. This graph is very interesting. So CB Richard Ellis is the largest, well, it's not a graph, it's a chart, but CB Richard Ellis is the largest commercial real estate company in the world. Look what they predict. So the number 3 growth market for industrial logistics in the country, they're predicting is the Central Valley. That's amazing. So what does that mean? That means we're going to get a lot of opportunity, a lot of deals. But on the flip side, the challenge, if you look under construction, you would think with that kind of demand and that growth that our under construction will be up in the top 5 at least, or top 10. We're number 29. So what that tells me, and I'm glad Craig's on the call because he'll relate to this, is we're not building buildings fast enough to be able to accommodate demand. And we need more. I've talked to several developers, and I know they're looking at more spec building. We do have some spec building out there, but we should expect to see a lot of demand, but you have to have places to put people. If you don't have sites and you don't have buildings, then you're going to miss out on opportunities. So this is something that we need to think about going forward, is that we have places, we have sites and buildings where we can put people so that we can compete. If we don't, then they're going to, the threat is they're going to look over the mountains and go to Reno, or they're going to look in Bakersfield, Kern, Fresno, those areas where there are opportunities for people to locate. And then the other part, net absorption, is, right now we're not seeing the activity necessarily now, but they're predicting it will happen. So we're number 18. That's not bad in the country on net absorption. But you see Inland Empire, number 1. So there's a lot of activity down in Southern California in Inland Empire, but we need to, this should grow for Central Valley over the next 2 or 3 years. Okay, here's a threat. So everybody has read the headlines, everybody's aware, multiple big companies leaving California. HP, they announced they're relocating their headquarters. Oracle, Tesla, there's been a huge swath of departures out of California. What's driving that? Well, first, because of the pandemic, they found that their employees can work from home, so they don't need so much office space. They also found that their employees want affordable places to live, and California, especially the coastal areas, do not qualify for that. And there are business climate issues. We can't continue to tax ourselves over and over again, expect companies to just sit and take it. So right now it's really interesting. I'm part of a group called the Bay Area Mega Region Alliance, and this group consists of our organization, the Bay Area Council, which is our counterpart in the Bay Area, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, and the San Joaquin Partnership. And we're collaborating on initiatives to try to improve the business climate in California. The regulatory environment, the tax climate, it's all not good. And we've got to deal with that, because if we don't, there are just too many reasons for companies now to leave. And the dynamics are such that companies can leave a lot easier. This idea that California is the only state in the country that innovates, that's just not true anymore. If you go to Austin, Texas, Salt Lake City, Provo, Denver, Portland, Seattle, Phoenix, Tempe, I mean, there are lots of places around the country that are generating what we call gazelle type companies and unicorn type companies. These are very disruptive companies, high tech. It's not just California anymore. So this is a threat, but for the Central Valley, it's an opportunity. And the reason I say that is as these companies disperse and their employees disperse, there still needs to be a social element for an employee who's working at home. You can't work at home forever. People want to interact with others in their field. And so what we predict, and we've heard this from others, is there's going to be growth in co-working spaces where tech workers can get together and collaborate and coordinate and socialize. And so we should be looking at opportunities like that. How do we turn maybe some of these big box retail centers that have gone dark into co-working spaces and to other types of new facilities in the future? But if we're going to compete with Texas and Idaho and Utah and Arizona and Nevada, we've got to improve our quality of life. We've got to have compelling reasons why people would want to be here. The McHenry or the museum, the American Graffiti Museum, great project for that. The Modesto Children's Museum, fantastic. We need more of things like that that will build the quality of life for young families to want to be here. So that's really the opportunity that we need to focus on. So what to expect? We're talking about this tactical strategic planning process. Number one, we need to really ascertain and use a data-driven method to determine what companies are experiencing, what are their concerns. We need to address the shifting paradigms. We need to determine who should do what regarding economic development. And we need to turn threats into opportunities, just like I said. And so that's really what we're going to do. Phase one of this process is we've hired a consultant. They're going to be going around to many movers and shakers and many opinion leaders and businesses to understand what do you feel and what do you think about where the economy is going, and then take all that information and start working on a plan, a collaborative process to develop a plan, and then determine who should do what. The goal is we've got to cover all the bases. Now, economic development is a very broad term that could be defined in multiple ways. It's kind of very elusive, very nebulous, and it means different things to different people. But essentially, economic development can be described as business attraction, retention, expansion. That's one of the traditional definitions. Workforce development, very important. The number one criteria that companies look at in determining a site location is workforce. Sites and infrastructure development. Like I said before, if you don't have a place to put people, then you're not going to attract many new prospects. Innovation and entrepreneurs. We need more entrepreneurs. Downtown development. Equity, that's another important trend in economic development, making sure that everybody has access to opportunity, not just few. And then small business support, housing, community development. I mean, there's so much involved in economic development. So what we need to do in order to be coordinated and have that well-oiled machine, we need to have a coordinated approach and determine lanes that create alignment with everybody. And that's what this process will do. So really, we're talking about two strategic planning initiatives. One will be a very tactical plan, which will be led by OS, and that was what the EDA grant was all about. And but it'll involve many others. And then a more strategic plan that is really aimed at some of the more of these global issues, like equity. And that plan is possibly going to be led by the Stanislaus Community Foundation. They're now exploring that, and I'm part of that, and many others are part of that as well. So in this plan, like I said, phase one will be the information gathering phase. We've already hired the consultant. We're working on a leadership council, a community leadership team that will be involved in helping us with the plan, and then determine who will be interviewed. We're going to do about 250 interviews through this process, but that will be the whole information gathering phase. Phase two is creating the actual plan, and that'll be based on the interview findings, and then we'll develop consensus by bringing that out in more of a what we'd call like a charrette or just a focus group, And then we'll work with our leadership team to determine programs accountability and then create a case statement. We did this before 6 years ago, but this is different because this has a much more focus on COVID and coming out of COVID. But anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to present. And I'm very excited. I think we're aligned very well. We have new leadership. And I think that going forward, we have a great story to tell. It seems like, it feels to me like it did back in 1989 in Pittsburgh. When I was there, I just graduated from my graduate program, and they were just coming out of a terrible recession. You know, the steel economy was flat, and we realized that we had to diversify the economy. We couldn't always do things the same way. And out of that process, Pittsburgh really, truly reinvented itself. Modesto, Stanislaus County, it feels like that now, as I recall back in 1989. So I'm excited about the future, and I'm excited about working with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. That was great. Bill, you want to take it back
Sure.
over?
Sure, I can jump in here. So I'd really like to open it up for a little bit of Q&A. Dave, if you've got a little bit there, and maybe I can lead off here too. And I appreciate you breaking down kind of the two-part plan there. If you can maybe speak to some of the anticipated time frame, when those things, are they going to happen simultaneously, or part one, then part two? And what would those associated timeframes be in working with this consultant?
So yeah, great question. So our plan, we've already started. And in fact, today we're going to be meeting with some of our key board members to talk about the leadership groups. And so we're getting everything organized. We're going to start the actual interviews 2 weeks from today, or not next week, but the following week. So our process is moving forward. In regard to the other one, we have a meeting coming up with Mary Ann and a lot of leadership. I know that Doris, I think that Trish is involved in that, but that, like I said, that's more global. That's looking at some of these real difficult issues like equity and homelessness and things like that. And that process is moving forward too. So they'll be simultaneous, and our process will lead to a campaign probably in late summer would be my guess, when we would get to that, to reach out and get funding for the campaign. But I will tell you that a real big part of our plan will be to help identify where others can kind of play a role. So we want you to be involved in that process. When I say you guys collectively, because there are things that we all can do. You know, OS, we can't do everything. We know that, and we don't want to do everything. And the chamber can't do everything, and Doris can't do everything, but if we have distinct lanes that we can operate in with measurable outcomes, then I think that's where we can have great alignment and really see something beautiful unfold. So, but it'll be this year. Long answer to your question. Sorry about that.
No, it's great. Thank you for the background color on that. Good description. And we can open it up to any other questions if any of you have.
There is a question from Bree, and it's it's private. What is the name of the chart you showed us? That is, Bree, I will send you that chart. It's from CB Richard Ellis. It came from they put out an annual report each year, and it's their prognostication for what's going to happen. And so I'll send that to you so you have it.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Mm-hmm. Actually, why don't I send it to Trish, and you can just distribute it out to everybody? Is that,
Sure.
Because I'm sure others would like to see that.
Sure.
That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, very good information, Dave. I do appreciate that. And it's sometimes a little difficult to know, given the content of a presentation, how much conversation or open Q&A we would anticipate there. Certainly we understand the need to stay focused from OS's perspective. I think you said it well, that, you know, neither well positioned to take care of everything and don't really want to. We're trying to collaborate and these kinds of things. So that's great too. And we will definitely look to stay in touch with you as we go through this year and find out what this process is looking like for you and how we can be in support and what we should anticipate too. So